Right, so first of all, welcome to Digitally Drawing Comics, or Drawing Comics Digitally when I decide which way around it's going to be. Who here is a comic artist or has created a comic in the past?
Created like 2 pages.
A 2-page one, that's a start.
It is one page.
And a 1-page one, okay, that's fair enough. You can get a comic down on 1 page. Who in here is intending to draw a comic going forward? So a couple, good. Now, essentially, this is going to cover quite a few things. While it is going to be predominantly digital, there's going to be a couple of things that can transition over to traditional material as well. So if you are using sort of pencil and paper, there should be a couple of bits in here for you.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. So, first of all, just to give you a glimpse of who I am and why I feel I'm at all qualified, even if only a little bit, to talk about the subject. My name's Sam. I am indie comic author of one comic called Arcadia and another comic called Superheroes Limited.
Woo!
But essentially, as I say, it's from doing it that then, to pass some knowledge on, hopefully get some other people going and on the right track. So, first of all, what we're going to cover today. We've got, this talk should be suitable for absolutely anyone, whether you've done 2-page comic, full 24-page comic, or if you've just never even stared at the art before, you should be able to take something away from this. If you don't, then I've done something horribly, horribly wrong. So, second of all, there's going to be sort of different topics on the form of sort of print specifications, what materials you can use, what sort of hardware and software you might require, as well as a couple of bits on where you can find good reference material and other resources for things like lettering, so on and so forth. And then, naturally, from that, other areas where you can find out more on the subject if you want to afterwards as well. Yeah, fantastic. So, pros and cons of digital versus traditional. So basically, why should you bother with digital? Now, the pros and cons sort of weigh each other out. The first is that when you're using digital, you don't have anything to replenish, so you're not constantly spending money on Bristol board, on pencils, on inking pens. You're not spending it on watercolours, Copic markers, so on and so forth. So the long-term costs are relatively low. However, the con of that is that the startup costs tend to be higher, where you're buying, if you don't already have a PC, the PC, then a tablet, then licenses for bits of software, that kind of thing. Now, the second thing is that you can undo any mistake when you're working digital. You have this brilliant button, it's called Control-Z. So if you get like an odd squiggly eye or anything like that, come on in. Yep, come in. No? I know. So if you get, like, oh, I shouldn't have put that line there, or that face doesn't quite look right, Control-Z, immediately undo it. If you're working traditional materials, there's only so many times you can rub something out before that smudge is there, and everyone's going to be able to see it in the final product, and you end up sort of either working around it or redoing the panel or page altogether. Downside of that is that if you're a perfectionist, and this is something that I've had to learn personally to not do, is that you'll sit there for bloody ages, you'll spend 4 hours going, this eyelash is not right. And you can't afford to do that. Traditional means that because you've only got so many goes at it, you do what you can, you move on. With digital, because you can just keep redoing and redoing, you can find yourself where you would have just gotten another 2-3 pages done still on that one panel. And that's something you want to avoid if at all possible. So with digital, once you've got your pages, you can send it off to your printer. It's already going to be in the right format, it's going to go straight to print, there's nothing you need to alter. If you're working traditionally, typically with the Bristol boards you use for comics, they're pretty big, so you're going to need an A3 scanner as opposed to an A4 scanner. So you've got to bung out for one of those, you've got to bring it into a digital environment anyway, play with the levels so that the blacks, everything like that are correct, and then make sure it's all formatted properly for the printer. Yep, come on in. Yeah. I think we've got some actions.
Thank you.
Great. So, where were we? Yes, if you scan it in, you've then got to alter the levels, you've got to get it ready for the printer, so you're bringing it into a digital environment at that stage anyway. So it sort of saves you a bit of time too. Now, you've not got a whole lot of physical space when it comes to digital, because yeah, you're still working on a computer, you've still got to have room for the tablet, the desk, so on and so forth, but you're not storing physical items. So if you're working traditionally, you finish a board for a page, and then that board needs to go somewhere. You don't have that problem here. As long as you've got a hard drive, or an external hard drive, or a thumbstick, bam, done. Something that takes up a tiny bit of space, maybe that big. The next one. Oh, and the downside of that, just to mention, is that if you are working digitally, you don't then have the original boards if you want to sell them off later at a convention or something, which some people do. They'll do a comic and then later they'll take the original pencil boards and sell them for, say, 20 quid a pop. Now, hardware-wise, your PC doesn't need to be anything special. So if your standard 300, 400 pound PC will probably do it these days. Sort of what I work on at the moment is 4 gig DDR2 RAM, 1 terabyte hard drive, because you are going to be storing a lot of high quality image files. It's going to take up file space faster than you'll realise. And at the moment, quad core processor. You can get away with dual core. You don't necessarily even need the quad core. So the PC itself, you can get away with something pretty basic. I can't stress this enough. Get a goddamn tablet. You don't want to draw a comic with a mouse. You just don't. Although the pen tool is lovely and great, don't do it. You're going to work so much faster and so much more conveniently with a tablet than you are with a mouse that it's a whole new world. You know, it's going to take you 5 hours to do on a mouse the same thing you can do in maybe 30 minutes with a tablet. Also, there is a phrase that goes around a lot saying, if it's not a Wacom, it's not worth it. In my experience, that's absolutely true. Originally, I had a Trust tablet. Couldn't trust the damn thing. It was absolutely horrible. The lines were everywhere, the pressure sensitivity was off all the time, it would jump all over the place. Just, if you're going to put the money down, you may as well put the money down on something that you know is at the top end. Because otherwise there's really no point. Commit to it full or don't commit. Now, there are several types of tablets as well, so if you're not entirely convinced on them, you can sort of start at the shallower end, and then say, right, okay, I like this, I'm good with how it works, let's take it up a notch. So, the actual types of tablets themselves, really you get 3 on the market. You've got the Bamboo. Now, the Bamboo, you're sort of looking at about A5 size drawing space. You're looking at around 40 to 60 pounds, depending on where you go. And it is pretty much just plug and play straight through USB. Most operating systems now have the drivers pre-installed as well, so you're not flying around with any of that. The downside to the Bamboo is naturally it's an A5 space to draw on. That A5 space represents your entire monitor. So if you've got a 19-inch monitor, compared to an A5 drawing space, you do a little arc like that with your hand, you're going to get a much larger arc on the screen. So for that reason, a lot of people tend to go with the Intuos. More expensive, but you get a larger area to draw on. Yes?
You say that the Bamboo is an A5. I've got Bamboo as an A4.
Ah,
I think
okay.
I got them when they first made them. I got the white one. I've had it for years.
Ah, okay.
But it's been great.
Yeah.
I was just a bit confused when you were like, they're only A5, so mine's massive.
Right, okay. There is an A4 one apparently.
Yeah. I'm
Not
not sure if you
seen
can still
it.
get it through, because I got it like years ago.
Right, okay, so it's an older
It's
one
like a
then.
Bamboo art.
Ooh, that's
It
interesting. I'm
costs
going to
like
have to Google that.
125 quid.
Right,
That's
okay.
Christmas present now.
Yeah, that price range you might want to start looking at the Intuos because of the pressure sensitivity on the Intuos compared to the Bamboo as well. Generally speaking then, there are exceptions. The Intuos tends to be bigger, which then eliminates the space problem. The other problem that does come up quite often though, and the one that I had, is that you're used to, if you're a traditional artist, you draw there, your lines appear under it, you know what you're doing in real time, you've got that feedback. If you're working digitally, especially on these 2 tablets, you're drawing lines over here, those lines are appearing over there. And that screws you up. That really does. And it's something you either adjust to, or you go, no, I can't do it. In which case, it's a lot of money, but the Cintiq. The Cintiq is a second monitor, essentially. You can tilt it like a drawing board. Whatever you draw onto the monitor screen appears directly under where you draw it, so it's much more like using traditional materials. So if anyone is struggling with that transition, or if you just really want to show off, there is the Cintiq. Now these things, sometimes you can be looking around the 1,250 quid mark. However, if you're smart, go on eBay, look for X-Display models of one, maybe two models down from the one that's currently on the Wacom store. I got my one, it was the 21X, I believe, had come out at the time. I bought the, I think it was a 15X X-Display model. Instead of £1,200, I paid £350. So you can get quite a considerable saving if you're willing to go with X-Display, if you're willing to hunt around eBay, things like that. But if anyone ever said, what would you recommend? This is without a doubt the single best thing I've ever bought. It's the biggest toy I have as well. It's a moment of glee, and it's one of those things where you buy it and the glee never wears off. Use it the first time you've got a grin like this, use it the 5,000th time, it's still there. And also, if you get one, back a sec, yeah, sorry. If you get one of these, and a Nintendo DS emulator, you can have one DS screen on your main PC, and then a giant touch screen for the other one. Pokemon Platinum on that thing, yes. It's marvellous. So, moving on from the tablets themselves, software. You're going to need something to draw with. There's a fair few things you can pick. Nothing's necessarily better than the other. A lot of the time it's personal preference and what people are more used to and more comfortable with. Photoshop tends to be the main go-to, simply because a lot of people now learn it in high school or college or what have you, so they've got that base knowledge there already, and they go in with it. A lot of the time as well, if you do any sort of creative course at university, you get a student license, which never seems to actually expire. You finish your 3 years, 2 years down the line, you're like, it's still working. So you've then got, after Photoshop, GIMP, which is free. Now, GIMP, a lot of the same features, a lot of the same stuff. Similar can be said for Paint Tool Sci. Paint Tool Sci I've not personally used, but a lot of people tell me that it is very good if you just want to get straight down to the nitty-gritty of drawing. And then you've got Manga Studio EX, which is purely for drawing comics. And although it's got manga in the name, manga, comics, the line's a bit blurred these days, let's be honest. Our artists are copying from them, their artists are copying from us. You take the colour out of Spider-Man just to the black and white lines, you flip it around the other way, essentially you've got manga. That divide doesn't need to be there these days. So, myself, I go with Photoshop. If anyone's worried about the costs, don't be, because there is now a really fantastic thing that Adobe have done. You can get Photoshop free and legal from Adobe Direct. Reason being is that CS2, which is absolutely fine for what we want to do with drawing comics, is now on the Adobe website for free, where they don't... Yes?
It's not compatible with Windows 8.
Ah. If you've got Windows 8, you're screwed.
Yeah. Well, majority.
Right, okay. Windows 7 and below, though, I can say it definitely runs on 7 because that's what I'm operating on at the moment. Naturally, below that is when the product was made, so that's fine there. If you are on Windows 8, maybe one of the other versions of the other pieces of software I mentioned on the previous page would be better suited for you.
Most of them aren't compatible. There's very little compatible with Windows 8.
Are we in the first year crisis of the operating system?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So, underline, don't get rid of it.
Yeah.
What about other platforms?
Other platforms, interesting. On the website, I believe there's also a Mac download. I don't know which OS of Mac, mainly because I don't tend to touch Mac much. When I did art school, it wasn't on Macs, it was on PCs because we were doing video game art and design, and Macs can't run EXEs, so it was a bit of, we had to go Windows for that. It is something that, by all means, we can, look up at some point. I can say for definite Windows, I can say I recollect it saying Mac, but I don't want to guarantee it. But essentially it's got the download, and next to it is your serial code. It's the same serial code they give to everybody, it's just a bunch of ones and zeros. You can download it for free, install it for free, register it for free. You're on the right side of the law, and you have Photoshop. Can you say any fairer than that? Actual question. I'm just going to assume that's a no. So, Photoshop, that's a link there if anyone does want to take note of it for the download. I know a couple of you, they gave us notepads in the goodie bag, it's brilliant. Yes, we have one guy writing it down, that's good. You may need to sign up for a free account on the website, but it is a free account. It's just a username login and that's it, really. Just going to let them write down the actual URL. They've also got CS2 versions of sort of Premiere Pro and various other bits and pieces. I think Illustrator is on there too. So if you want to get the CS2 Creative Suite without a penny, there you go. And this is, as I say, the no-budget approach. It's great.
Another note is if you follow the creators of Manga Studio, they every now and then do a random sale for Manga Studio. They did it in November.
Alright.
I got it for 25 quid.
25 quid.
So if you watch
That's-
them, they'll randomly do sales for them like on their
So sort of
programs.
follow them on Twitter,
Yeah.
Facebook. Yeah.
I found it on Tumblr, like my friends like, get it?
Okay. Yeah, no, when it goes that low, you can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it, that precious to play around with it and try it out
Yeah.
from what I've heard, yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Follow Manga Studio, everybody. So, moving on, we're going to look at a little bit of comic theory before we move on to actually making a comic, simply because, and this is going to be relatively brief, a lot of people understand comics as a lot of universal rules. We're just going to quickly glance over this page from Batman #1, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, DC Comics. First of all, panels. Now, panels naturally how the story progresses. We read left to right, we go from the top, we go to the bottom. This should be very basic standard stuff. I don't expect this to be news to anybody. The one thing that is different with comics to any other art form though is how you guide the viewer around the page. If you look at a traditional painting or a traditional piece of art, you want to create a loop, so you want to go round. So you want the viewer to actually wind up back wherever they started, so that their eye never actually comes off the piece. And you put various shapes and various colours in to make sure that they do that, and they just continually loop round. Because as soon as they break away, they're going to exit somewhere, and that's when they start looking at the next piece, and that's when you lose your sale. With comics, you're trying to get them to the next page. So you want to forget all of those laws. You want to say, right, I'm going to break that, I'm going to purposefully lead them out. In this page, it's done one of two ways, once with the text and once with the artwork. So you can see here, eye comes in, you've got the very, very top box, just Batman's thoughts. You've then got the lining of the cape over his shoulder, stark black line brings you down to the second box, which is in a large area of black. So this is the artist purposefully leading the eye from box 1 to box 2. Box 3 is then following the shape of his head, this curve round here. So you're actually going down the side of the back of Two-Face's head. And again, this is something that's been done on purpose. The artist knows what they're doing, they know where these text boxes are going to be. Now, the problem is, it's sort of like a typewriter. We've taken the reader from here, chick, 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 here. What we need to do is a new line, so we just need to straight back over. So what they've done with that is they've made Two-Face lean over. So you're leaning over, you're following that shoulder down and out, and you're following it straight into the second panel. Now this second panel, there's a reason his head is facing diagonally downwards, and there's a reason that the arm is doing the same. The reason they're doing that is so that your eye follows it to this box here. Now this is where it's something you need to be conscious of while you're drawing comics, but it's something that eventually you should start getting a feel for. At first, you don't want to overthink it because you don't want it to be too obvious to the reader. It should feel somewhat natural, but in this example, once we've come down here, we've come straight down then to this box. What's leading us back up and over, you've got again the cape, you can see is doing this arc, and it's doing the arc straight through Killer Croc. And because it's doing that arc, it's bringing us through to the next panel. What's bringing us then out of the page is Batman punching Killer Croc, and Killer Croc is literally falling off the page. So he's falling off the page, we know where he's going, we follow him there, and we go over to the next page as a result. Everybody relatively, that's only very basic rules. There are entire books that go into it in much more detail, but that is a base understanding of it. Are there any questions on that bit at all? All happy? All good? We're good. Okay. So the other thing I want to discuss, and again, if you read comics, this is very obvious to you, and I apologise, but for anyone who might not recognise it before, this is going to be somewhat of a light bulb moment. you've got spacing between panels. Now, this spacing is not always consistent. The reason being is that events happen between the panels. We know that someone's got to get from standing at point A to standing at point B. Now, the spacing between the panels therefore denotes time passing. Now, how much width you give to that guttering then denotes how much time is passing. So if it's a long period of time, if you're going from location A to location B, you want a bigger gap so that you take the reader out of that location and drop them into the new location. If it's something like a fight or an argument, you want very, very tight panels that are really close together, or as you saw in the Batman example, it was a frantic fight and they were just putting the panels over the top of each other so that it was saying, right, this is happening now, 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 now. Here it's a conversation, so it's a little more spaced out, it's a little more, they're talking, here's a breather, they're talking, here's a breather, they're talking. So you can set the pace of that and you can control, in a sense, how quickly your reader goes round that page. And it's a very powerful tool to use. But although readers aren't consciously aware of it, they are subconsciously aware of it. And that means that if this is inconsistent at any point, they're going to start getting confused. So if you're going to use it to play around with things, make sure that you don't break your own rules, if you see what I mean. Moving on. Right, so from the comic theory, let's move on. Let's actually start creating our own pages, because we know the basics now. Having a play around with it is probably the best way to learn. Trial and error will get you everywhere with the creative arts, and it also gives you a lot of time to build in your own structure and your own way of doing things. Now, when you first create a page, this is what appears in Photoshop. I should imagine Sai, Manga Studio, etc. pretty similar. You want to get these settings right. Otherwise, your printer is going to axe murder you. And I'm not even kidding. They may even charge you extra to put it right if you've not done it for them. So that's another thing to be aware of. Sometimes they'll say, look, these pages, we had to do extra work on them to get them compatible for the printer, therefore here's an extra 50 quid on your bill. And you don't want that. This is a zero-sum game. You don't do it as a profession, you do it as a hobby when you're indie. Myself, I'm currently running at approximately a £700 loss. So, first thing that you want to do, the reason this is set to 7 by 10.5 is because that is the US comic size that my particular printer likes to work with. The printer that you approach may give you a slightly different size. This is the one I'm running with at the moment. This is very important, resolution 300. When you're printing, there's something called DPI, which is dots per inch. Now, dots per inch is basically how close pixels are going to be when the printer then runs it through. So if you've got something that's going to be displayed on a website or a web page, you typically go with 72 dots per inch. If it's print, minimum is 300. Some people work at 600, but really the minimum is 300. The next one is your color setting. Now, most things you create on a computer will be preset to RGB. RGB is making all of the colors that are viewed out of 3 colors. Now, that's designed purely for presenting things on a screen because that's how most monitors display. We're not making it for a monitor, we're not making it to be viewed online, we're looking at print here. If you want to make a webcomic, that's fine, use RGB for that, but be aware that you might need to make some changes if you then decide to do a collected print run. Some people do a webcomic, and then they release a book after they get to, say, strip 100, and it's a collection of those 100 strips. And they have to do a lot of work getting it from RGB to CMYK, and making sure that the colours still look okay. And even in those cases, it's easier to start in CMYK and go to RGB. It's easier to lose one of the colours in the mix than it's to add one in. Now, as I say, with that, CMYK, because we're going through print with this one, if you're doing anything for your website or to advertise it online, go back to RGB for advertisements online. Is there anything there that anyone would like to revisit at all? Right, we're good, we're happy, cool. Now, before you draw anything on your page, make sure you've set up your master page template. So there are 3 areas. These are not the technical names for them. These are this makes it simpler to explain names for the areas. So first of all, you're going to have a bleed area, and that can literally be cut off during printing. When you're putting something through a printer, the plates can change alignment, so something that's at the very top here may necessarily disappear off the edge of the page. You've then got an art safe area where, with relative certainty, you can say, right, that's going to be on the final product, and then a text safe area where you're just making doubly sure that any text you're going to be able to read and it's going to be legible. To go into those in a little more detail, again, these are the ones I use for my particular printer and my guide, so to speak. Your guys might give you something slightly different. Okay? At the moment, I work with page size, as we mentioned, of 7 inches by 10.5 inches. And you've got, right to the edge here, this red line. Then we've got the art safe area, which is 6.75 by 10.25, which is up to this blue line. Now, the reason that any important art elements, so anything that's crucial to the plot or story, need to be within here, and any panel borders need to be within here, is because, as mentioned earlier, if the printer moves, something that's over here could end up over here, and it's going to get potentially cut off. So, if you want something to actually purposefully fill up the whole page, sometimes you want to print right the way to the edge, like if you're having a scene over a city view or a school, and you want the blue sky to go off the edges every which way, then that blue sky should come right up to this edge to guarantee that's going to reach the edge of the page. Now, the text safe area is 6.25 by 9.75 inches. The reason that this is smaller is because naturally text is one of the most important parts, otherwise you don't know what's going on. And when you're putting something together, particularly if it's a graphic novel or a thicker book, when it's being stapled together, imagine you've got this page here and the next page over here. Now, it's going to be done as a sheet, so you're going to have 2 pages put on one sheet, then folded, and then pages in between. Depending on how thick your book is, this could curl inwards to the spine. So if you've got text here, it's curled inwards towards the spine, you're going to have the next page coming off here. I know I'm visualising that really badly with my hand, but hopefully you can get the general gist of that. So that's why you're just making doubly sure you don't want anyone's, grand dramatic entrance saying, I am Captain such and such, being ruined because it's over here and you can't read it. So, moving on. Typically, here we're going to be talking about the process that I use, not necessarily the process you have to follow. Every artist works in their own unique individual way. As a general rule, I tend to do rough thumbnails, you're getting the layout of the page, making sure the page flows okay, sort of rough character placements, you're getting used to things, you're getting your head around it. Once you're happy with that, because it's very easy to chop and change things when you're only doing the bare bones basics, once you're happy with that, you can then by all means move on to inks, and then finally through to colour. Just going to take a look at each of those stages just in a little more detail here. So the thumbnails, again, very, very rough. Nothing sort of pinned down, nothing set for certain. You even put in little notes to yourself, like there, it's literally drawing the basic shape of 2 houses, arrows either side, just to say, this is going to be all the way down. And you're just sort of trying to get the basics there. So you're saying, right, this is what I want to happen. Yes?
Do you write a script, or do you just write them straight
Yes.
into there?
I do work from a script. I would recommend working from a script. You want to know what you're doing before you do it, by all means. Probably something that should have had its own slide, and I do apologise for that. Basically, a script, it depends on how you want to write it. Some people do it novelised, so that they know what sort of atmosphere they want to put across when they then come back to read their own notes. Other people just do it sort of movie script version. So-and-so enters, name, speech, name, speech, name, speech, next panel. If you're working from a script, you know what your page count is, you know what's going to be on each page. The only thing that you might come across, writing a script first, is that you might find I've put too many words in here to actually fit on the physical page, or I've put too many panels in here so it's going to look cluttered. So the script should be something that's malleable. It should be a structure, but you should be able to chop and change and make adjustments necessary, so that if you do go, I've put 14 panels on one page and the maximum I should really be putting is say 7, then at least you can maybe move it to another page or consolidate some panels down. There are ways to work with it, so don't tie yourself into something too tightly to the point where you can't move it about a bit. This is usually after the script's written, and as I just mentioned, while you're doing it this roughly, if you do come across a situation like that, it's okay. You've not done several hundred hours worth of work that you're now going to have to get rid of entirely and start over. So that's why these are a beauty. It also means you can do your whole comic like this, read through it as if you were the reader afterwards and go, alright, does this make sense? Is this okay? Does this flow page to page? Before you then do your inks, so that you can spot any crucial errors ahead of time. Once you've got that, this is when you then move on to inks. Now, inks themselves, this is where you're putting in the details, this is where you're being very tight and refined, this is where you're going for, going for gold, essentially. Now, the inks are going to form the basis for when you then do colour. If you've got a bad base there, your colours are going to look bad, and your final thing's going to look bad. Everything's going to look bad. You can polish a turd, it's still a turd. So get this right. And if you need to spend time on it, do. Don't be afraid to delete things out, don't be afraid to restart things. Actually looking at this, there are errors on here, which is great. But the other thing you want to remember is line weights when you're inking. Now, line weights essentially comes into light sources and also comes into the density of an object. So if you've got a very dense, heavy object, it should have a thicker line to show that it is a heavier object. If you've got something that's only a small detail or a light thing, so you've got a feather, should be a very thin line for the feather. If you've then got a brick, the brick should have a visibly thicker line than that feather. Now, this also plays into, with light sources on humans, if you've got a light above an arm, and it's coming down onto the arm, the top line should be thinner than the bottom line, because the bottom line is where it's going to be casting shadows because it's directly opposing the light source. So this is something else that you want to be aware of when you're inking. It's also why I recommend a tablet, because a tablet, you've got pressure sensitivity, so you can do very easily that light line for one side of the arm and the heavier line for the other side of the line. All you do is push the pen down harder. And with a mouse, you've got to change your brush size, you're then there manually fiddling it to get the natural curves on each end. It's just a pain in the arse, really. So, inking is, as I say, one of those bits where, because it's going to be so crucial, you want to spend that extra time on it before you then move on to the colours. Now, colours, I didn't put the shaded one on, just the flat colour one. Okay, pretend this is shaded. Now, the colours basically are two steps. So flat colour, then shaded. Now flat colour is essentially this, where all you're doing is putting down your base colours, the colours from which you will make your light and dark colours later on. While you're putting down the flat colours, you want to bear in mind what sort of area you're in, and what sort of lights are in that area. For example, this is a scene at night, so there is a blue hue over the page to denote that it's night time. In the shading there were then some bits of orange because street lights tend to be really garishly orange. And if you've got a sunset scene, again you want to go for, instead of a blue over hue, sort of an orangey red over hue to show that the sun's setting, the colour of the sky has changed. Just means that your characters are going to lend to your backgrounds that little bit easier, and just means that it's not jarring. If someone's skin tone is exactly the same through your comic, whether they're in a badly lit office, whether they're out in broad daylight, or whether they're at the pub in the evening outside having a smoke, your readers are going to pick up on it. Again, they might not comment on it, but they're going to know. They may not even realise that they've picked up on it, but they will know, and it will detract from the overall quality. And you also want to just pick your light sources very carefully and remember where they are. You wouldn't, for example, have a shadow coming from her facing off into the alley, and then have a shadow from him coming out this way, because then you're saying, well, where's the light if that's happening? Sometimes you're working with multiple light sources, for example, if you've got window lights on or something. That's a bit of a headache, but you can work it out. Just remember that light travels in straight lines, and that light bounces typically at 45-degree angles. So, moving onwards from the actual page layout, when you're actually drawing, you're going to want your brush set up to make the most of your tablet. Now, again, these are my own settings. You'll want to fiddle with yours to make sure that you're comfortable with it and it fits your personal style. Essentially, you've got, this is again for Photoshop, I imagine it to be similar in other programs. Basically, you can control things like the roundness of the pen through the angle that your pen is actually at. So you can pull the pen up if you want to tighten it, pull it down if you want to loosen it. You can change things like the angle, you can change the actual thickness of the line through how hard you press the pen down and the pressure of that pen. Basically, just get it to the point where it feels as natural as possible for you. These are not set guidelines to go by. These, again, it's what I like, but it's not necessarily what will work for you. So, get in these settings, basically you pick the brush, then there's a little arrow next to the brush you've selected. You can then go into the brush settings and pull from there and bring up this window for you. So, once you've got your brush and you're happy with it, then go ahead and do your line work. There are some places like DeviantArt, so on and so forth, where people will have their own line work brushes and they'll allow you to download those. Some people use different brushes for different types of line. For example, I know a few people, if they're working on brickwork or a sword, they will use a line which actually has some knobbly edging to it, so that you've got the worn edge of the brick or the sword there. Again, it is up to you as to what you'd like to use. Okay, so there's a couple of things with the brush tool, just to make things a lot easier and faster for you. You've got your square bracket keys on the keyboard. Tapping those will increase or decrease the size of your brush. So basically, if you want a thicker line, you can just hit the square bracket twice, go ahead, do a thicker line. If you want to thinnen it, use the other bracket, you can make the line thinner. Just means that you're not going from drawing at the tablet to then hopping over to the PC screen, bringing yourself out of your flow and then going back again. You can literally have one hand on the tablet drawing and the other one on the keyboard and just, type away basically. Now holding shift while you're putting a line in allows you to draw in a straight line, either horizontally or vertically. Very handy for paneling, very handy for horizon lines. Also means that you've not got to get a ruler out as well. Alternatively, if you want other types of lines, say one that's not quite on a precise angle, you can click in one area, hold down shift, click in another area, and Photoshop will automatically draw that line in for you. So you can literally say from here to here, boom, it's there for you already. Alternatively, there's the pen tool, which several people are probably familiar with. The pen tool is accessed either on the sidebar with the other options in Photoshop, or alternatively, if you press P on your keyboard, you'll automatically switch to the pen tool. Pen tool, you click in one area, you click in a second area, it joins up those 2 points. If you hold down on your second click and move the mouse, you can actually create an arc. Once you've done that, you can right-click, press stroke path, and that will then put a line there for you, and that's it, you've got a curve. That comes in handy for legs, especially, because legs are usually these things where you're inking, usually zoomed in for inking, so that you can get the minute details in, and a leg actually goes for quite a bloody way. So you can literally pen tool, get the arc, stroke and path, done. That is your leg. Not your leg, of course. That would be weird if I was showing your particular leg. So, just some basics to help speed up the workflow. And as I say, they're things that you sort of find after a little while on your own. But you go, why the hell didn't anyone tell me about this? I would have saved so much time on X, Y, and Z if I'd have just known. So they are handy to have there. We are going to go on to some, well, I wouldn't call them cheats, but they are things that you can use to help yourself. Feel free. Thank you. So number one is don't be afraid to use reference material. Reference material can come from many forms. Every teacher you've ever had says don't use it. I say screw every teacher you've ever had. It can be great. If you're sitting there and you're like, I want to do a mockery of Starbucks, but there isn't one near me, Google Starbucks. You'll get hundreds of storefronts for Starbucks. You can just be like, right, these are the recurring themes. I know what to mock now. Fantastic. You don't have to get off your ass, go into town and actually take photos of the real thing. Someone else has already done it for you, in 9 out of 10 cases. Again, DeviantArt and places like Stock Exchange, people will actually put up stock photos. This is important, I'm going to say this now. Don't trace over stock photos. If you do, I will find you, I will hunt you, and I will kill you. It's disrespectful to the person taking the stock photo, and it's also cheating your ability. Simply because it's then going to stand out and jar, because the anatomy is going to be more or less perfect if you're drawing over a photo reference, and then every other panel that you've drawn freehand isn't going to have that same precision. it's going to stand out, people are going to know, don't do it. By all means, if you want to say, I want to see how this kind of pose looks, then yeah, DeviantArt, Stock Exchange, find photos like these, just to give you sort of a base idea. Don't even be afraid to, and I've done this on a couple of occasions, just get in your undies or get your missus to get in her undies, get the camera out and say, right, I'm trying to draw them doing this, and just take a photo. Because if you're trying to draw the human body, good news, you've got one. It's great. Especially hands. People are always saying, how do I draw hands? I keep buggering up on them, I can never do them. Like, you want to know the best way to reference a hand? Hello. And literally, if it's like holding a pen or something, just grab a goddamn pen and look at your hand. It's there. So you've got the human anatomy. The other thing, this maybe not so much, but if there are other comic artists you like, or if you know there's a pose similar to what you want in a particular comic, go ahead, look it up. It's not going to hurt you, it's going to help you. The only downside to it is that when you're drawing comics, typically you are distorting reality, you are simplifying reality to get your particular style. Now, to warp reality, you must first master it, which is why everybody ever should do life drawing. When you're looking at this, someone has already taken reality and warped it. So you're not looking at what's necessarily a realistic interpretation of a person. You're also not looking at something that's going to match your style. Red Robin Tim Drake, how many artists have drawn him? You could literally put pictures of him side by side from various artists. He's going to have different builds, different muscle structures, different variations of anatomy. He's going to go left, right, and centre. So you don't want to take any of that as gospel, because it's already someone saying, oh, I draw legs short, or I draw legs long because it looks elegant. If you want to see a good example of anatomy gone horribly wrong, Korean manhwa. Oh my god. Especially Dragon's Crown, that's been getting a lot of press lately.
There's another good one that's been going on,
Oh.
Hawkeye Initiative.
Alright.
It's mainly taking the piss out of really bad drawings of women's anatomy
Ah.
in comics.
So the ones where the waists are like 2 centimetres
Well,
thick.
basically where they haven't got a spine and
Oh.
stuff like that, and they
The ones where they're contorted right round.
yeah, and they've
Yeah.
basically done it and got people to draw male characters in the same positions and in the same costumes to show how ridiculous it is.
It's like that Spider-Man cover where, some of you may have seen this, there was Mary Jane sitting on a couch, and the pose she was sitting in, people were like, that is not possible, and then you got a flood of photos on the internet the next day of various women and guys sat on the couch like, it was fantastic. And it illustrates the point perfectly as well, that, you know, it's not, bones don't always go that way. So, the other thing you can use is 3D modelling. You don't have to be actually trained to do 3D modelling. It's really quite simple. And you also don't have to have a budget for 3D modelling either. Some programs are free, some programs are very cheap, and some are ridiculously expensive and should be shot. Obviously the expensive ones are Autodesk Maya and Autodesk 3ds Max. Now I love Maya, my daughter is named after Maya, and I wish I was kidding. But I got to use them during uni, I got to get used to them. They're complicated programs. You go into them, you've got menus within menus within menus. It is menuception within Maya and 3ds Max. If for what you want to do with comic art, usually you're putting up very rough references, don't use it, would be my advice. I would say Silo 2 is probably the best thing you can use for making references for art. It's simple, it's robust, it's a basic tools only. It's literally Alt-C, create a cube. Grab that cube, stretch it, pull it, do whatever you want with it. The actual barrier to entry is incredibly low. If Autodesk Maya's barrier to entry is up here, then the barrier for entry for Silo is literally like oh, excuse me? What's up? So, Silo is usually on Steam as well, so you can get it very easily. You don't have to jump through hoops. It's been on the Steam sale before, it's been down as far as $24.99, so similar to the Mega Studio pricing. It's great for low budget. Google SketchUp is something that generally there's a freeware version and then you can upgrade to paid if you want to. Google SketchUp is good for if you're making architecture or buildings, like if you want to build your city that you're going to set your comic in, you're insane. usually just build a street at a time or something for quick reference and only roughly. If you do want a vast cityscape, you can just knock up a bunch of rectangles and stuff in Google SketchUp. Bam, you've got a cityscape right there. You can just sort of render that out and you're done. Outside of that, if you want more complex shapes and SketchUp, may not be the best way to go, more because SketchUp seems to have a mind of its own sometimes.
I found out with SketchUp is if you use that and you've got like a character's house, you do that and you just make squares like chairs and tables and stuff like that, and they're just
exact same thing in Silo.
You just make, if you've got a house, that's what I recommend it for, because then you can get the different angles in your house and then get the squares.
Like the kitchen table as well, you can go right round
and
it.
then you can use that as like your under sketch, and then you can then draw your thing based on the, so you get the perspective. Right?
You're preempting where this is going. It's psychic. You then got Blender and Cinema 4D seem to be popular for some reason. I don't know why, I don't like them. They're there, I will give you the option. Try it. If you like it, I don't know who you are or where you came from, but Blender and Cinema 4D exists. There is also Poser, which we'll cover a bit more in a moment. If we move on, this is Silo, this is the interface. Just to give an example of how it can be used, this is a desk that I made within Silo. There was a call center scene. Yeah, we're talking indie comics when we're saying there was a call center scene. And basically it's just very quickly, cylinder for a can of Coke, cylinder for a can of Coke, rectangle for a motor. Okay, the phone was a little more intricate, but again, the desk itself, rectangle, rectangle, rectangle. And this is what you were saying a moment ago about building a character's house. You could very easily knock up a kitchen table with like a couple of plates or something on. You can move, like these cans can be moved around and stuff, the keyboard can be moved around. I have not given that poor bugger a mouse.
I don't even go to that detail level if I was going to do it. I literally just do it just so you can get perspective.
Yeah, that's
so, like,
true.
You've got a room and chairs and maybe a TV. I wouldn't put like coat fans and stuff in.
Have any of you ever been in a position where you sort of gone, I want to draw something, but I want to draw it from here, like I want to draw someone sitting on the couch, but I need it looking up at them. And you sort of down at the couch, and you're sort of going, and then the missus comes in, she's like, have you lost your bloody keys again? And you're just there, like, you sort of, you go in the bathroom, you're like, I wonder how this looks, and you're like standing on the ceramic bathtub, with one leg up on the wall, trying to get the angle right, and you suddenly hear, I'm trying to have a shower here, love. This makes it so much easier, because you can just build the basics of that room, and if you want to be up in the ceiling tile, you don't look like a pervert. It's great. You can literally be ceiling cat. You also get a much better idea for where your characters live as well. So you don't get people running up to you at conventions going, your characters were having a secret conversation in the kitchen, but we can see the person they're talking about is sat in the living room. Now from previous panels, it's established that she would probably be within earshot. You care too much. But it happens, and you actually end up getting a feel for that, and once you've built the house in 3D, as you were mentioning, you can see, yeah, she kind of probably would hear that actually, he may have had a point. Now from this, you use that, as you mentioned, as your undersketch, so instead of doing thumbnails, you would print screen this and just bring it into your preferred program of choice. This actually ended up looking like that. So our dutiful call center worker is playing solitaire. And you can see how it transitions from one to the other. Now, the only thing you've got to worry about when doing this is something called the uncanny valley, which some of you may be familiar with already. What it essentially says is that the closer something comes to being real, the more we start to see the imperfections and the more it starts to creep us out. It's a problem modern video games have, and if you ever want to see it really to the extreme, watch, what's the name of that film? Polar Express?
Polar Express.
Yes. They get an adult to do the motion capture for children. Now, I'm sure all of you know the anatomy for a child is very different. So you've got a kid walking around like this, and you can see it. Because I've tried to go for realistic graphics, you can see it's wrong. And modern games have the problem where their characters look dead, because we're starting to realise that actually skin doesn't take in light like that, or the eyes don't reflect like that. You have glass eyes. Every video game character has glass bloody eyes. It wasn't a problem in the PlayStation 1 games, they were made of blocks. We weren't going to take that too seriously, that was open to interpretation. We're not going to look at the Animaniacs and say, oh, that's not right, he'd have broken his leg. But you are if they do some 3D version where you can see every individual strand of fur on them. And again, it's here using that discretion so that it doesn't look too, too dead, really, would be the right word. Thankfully, I use it mainly for objects that are not organic. So it's okay because they should be rather, stiff and still. They're not malleable, so you can kind of get away with it. I wouldn't suggest it for characters too much. However, if you're going to, this is Poser. This is 4 posers, really. The poser, essentially, you get a figure, you've got various controls, you're in a 3D space, you can move it around, get it in a pose you want, and then you use that again as your underdrawing. And that again is great for angles and perspective and various bits and pieces. However, poser costs money, and you're on a low budget usually doing this. I don't like spending my money if I don't need to. You don't like spending your money if you don't need to. I would suggest an alternative. This also means you get to screw with Wolverine. This is brilliant. XNA Lara. I don't know if anyone's heard of this before, but this is a program written by Tomb Raider fans to extract models from video games with the rigs and everything intact. So what you do is you take someone who's similar to the build of your character, for example Wolverine here, you've got all of the bones and all of the controls for those bones, and you can make Wolverine do whatever you want, essentially. And again, you can use that sort of as your underdrawing. Again, don't use it as a direct thing. Use it, like I mentioned with the photo references earlier, have it on a separate screen to look at. Don't draw over the top of it. I know it's tempting, I know it's right there, but do not draw over the top of it. That's the line between cheating and using reference. Now, the other thing as well, be very careful when you're searching XNA Lara, because a lot of people, you can see where this is going. Hey, let's alter the model of Wolverine so he's nude, and then we'll get lightning from Final Fantasy XIII and a model of a table. Do I need to tell you where that goes? The internet seems to be bloody full of it.
People have been using it with Bioshock Infinite recently.
Really? I haven't started Bioshock Infinite yet. I bought it like 5 weeks ago.
I got that first.
Yeah. It's like, you get to that age where you're buying games, you're like, I'm never going to get around to this. But, yeah, don't use it for porn, guys. The internet has enough of that. We can ignore Rule 35, and besides which, the characters that are in this, Rule 35 does not apply, there already is porn of it. So,
if you thought of doing it, someone's already done it.
Usually.
This program anyway.
But yeah, it's great for legitimate purposes, and it's free, and because of the wealth of characters you can get from a variety of video games, again, there's a lot of different body types and such you can get. It does have the same disadvantage that you have with referencing other comics, in that these characters are already going to be stylized, and that style may not necessarily match yours. Yes?
Would it be good if you, I know you said don't copy it, but you
Yes.
draw like the basic shape of it, like a stick figure, would that be alright?
Oh, we're going into greys. Grey areas. Did you
Did
get caught? That would probably be the question. I would say, again, my preference, obviously I'm not going to know whether you do it or not, because I don't take the axe murdering thing too seriously, but my preference would be if people were going to use this tool to screenshot it, have it as a separate image at the side, and then draw your own from scratch. Sort of like if you took a photo of someone walking, you're not going to draw directly over that photo. Just be sensible, really.
I personally am not a big fan of tracing over character models at all, to be honest. So if you do that, you do something that's...
Well, it's not going to be your style either, because again, their anatomy is going to be different to your own.
I always go to real life and I can.
Yeah.
Whenever you're looking at something, because it's, even if you're going to skew stuff, because you're going to make your character huge heads or something,
I think the best way to put this is it's a resource, not something to live by.
the architecture is a bit different because you're worried about perspective.
Yeah.
That's the thing you're worried about, not anatomy. If you want to get perspective and knowledge, that's again something you want to do in real life, really. But yeah,
Where it's possible to do real life, yes. If it's not, and this is sort of, I wouldn't say the next best thing, probably the third best thing. It's more just making you aware that's there, really. and that it can be used, but don't rely on it.
There's
That's
some
very
really good reference sites out there, just human references.
Oh yeah.
Online.
Female anatomy for the artist. That's the missus asked me why I'd got a membership for a porn site. You just say like it's not porn. It's anatomy reference. And of course, when I was on xvideos.com later that day, that was porn. I'll admit that. But female anatomy for the artist is not, unless you're going for very, very, very soft core. It's not porn.
There's some pretty good stuff out there of people with skin suits and stuff.
Oh yeah. For example, the one earlier was from Senshi Stock on DeviantArt. She's very good, and she's always wearing something, so you don't have to feel guilty. And if you still do something while she's wearing this stuff, really, come on.
Men are harder to find than women.
Yeah, they are. Women tend to be more willing to do it.
There's a few good places to go, but
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on from the XNA Lara though, lettering. This is a one-stop shop really for lettering. Comic book fonts, there's one general rule: don't use Comic Sans, don't use Comic Sans, and don't use Comic Sans. This right here, there are paid fonts and there are free fonts. The free fonts are absolutely fine. The paid fonts, yeah, it depends if you want to splash out for them or not. Personally, I stick to the free ones. I do just fine. You know, I don't really have any issues with it. Now, these guys, their terms are a little weird as well. If you're indie, if you're self-publishing, and I mean indie, I don't mean Image or Vertigo indie, that's not indie, then that's okay, you can use their free fonts for free, you don't have to pay many licenses. If you're picked up by a publisher, that's where they draw the line and say you have to have a license or subscription. Usually your publisher will hold that license or subscription already for the fonts they're using, and they will tell you what fonts they want you to use to fit in with their branding. So while you're on your own, go with blambot.com. There are a couple that I'd recommend especially, just to give you an example of what they do too. I mean, you go on there and it is all, you can see these would be perfectly good comic fonts. There's a free one, F symbol. There's a free one, paid. If it's a P, you have to pay for it. If it's an F, it's free. I've seen some at sort of $12.99. I've seen others at $74.99. Yeah, it tends to be their special effects fonts tends to be the cheaper ones, and then their dialogue fonts are the ones where they hammer you because they're going, oh, you're going to use this on every page once you buy it, whereas a special effect font you're only going to use once or twice. But essentially there's Anime Ace, 10 Cent Comics, and the other one is called Mighty Zio. Those three are free ones that are very, very good. In fact, I think they're better than some of the paid ones. I don't understand why those are free. But yeah, Mighty Zio is gorgeous. In fact, Mighty Zio is what you're seeing at the top there. That's all in Mighty Zio. All of the annotations so far have been Mighty Zio. This is Anime Ace, just for comparison. Mighty Zio, the reason I prefer it to Anime Ace is because Mighty Zio has lowercase as well, whereas this only has caps. One other rule that's interesting with comics is I's in comics. It's the only letter where the uppercase and lowercase in most fonts is different. And you can see this is a lowercase I in a comic font. The capital actually has the stripe through at the top and bottom. And some people do get finicky about that. So if you're saying I as in myself, yes. If it's part of a word or if it wouldn't usually be a capital, that. It's the only letter with it. I don't know why exactly, but it's one of those things that it's just what they do and just follow along and don't cause a fuss, essentially. But they will do all your sound effects, all your everything. That's a one-stop shop. That's very, very handy. Alright, once you've got a comic, you want to look at getting it printed. Now, this guy's actually quite local to myself, UK Comics. He's SN6 postcode. He will do anywhere and everywhere in the UK. He will deliver to you at the convention itself if need be. His turnaround times are blindingly quick. He can get you your print run in usually about 4 days. His prices are fantastic. He does you discount the more... I sound like a bloody advert. I don't mean to be, he's just a really nice guy. But the more you're ordering, the lower the price goes. So for example, I asked him with my first comic, Arcadia, which if anyone wants to take a look at its print quality, there it is. The pages are a lot thicker than Marvel DC stuff. You don't feel like you're using recycled toilet paper for your comic, it's great. There's actually a bit of weight to it as well. I don't know if anyone wants to pass it around at all, or but you can sort of see how the pages are higher than they would be in a Marvel or DC book. But with him, you know, sort of, I asked him about 50 copies, he said it'd be £1.50 a book. 100 copies came down to about £1.20, and then 150 copies, which was what I eventually went with, that was £1.05 per book. So as I say, it just comes down dramatically the more you get. And if you're in the area, he will knock off the delivery costs if you're willing to go pick them up from him. Which, if you live in Wiltshire, that's great for you. If you don't, his delivery options aren't too bad. As I say, a lot of cons he's exhibiting at anyway, so he'll just come plonk the box on your table at the con if need be. Kablam are another print service. They exist purely online. They're an American company, but they do ship to the UK. I've not used them personally, but I do know a lot of people do. Now, both UK Comics and Kablam will offer you a discount if you allow them to display a full-page advert on the back page of your comic. And most actual retail comics, like Marvel, DC, etc., already have back-page adverts, so it's something that viewers are used to seeing. And also, who honestly puts anything on the back cover of a comic these days, unless it's a wraparound cover? You're not losing anything, you're only gaining, you're getting discounts from the company, and you're helping them get more clients. Which is, especially for this guy, because he's on his own. They're a corporation, screw him, he's on his own. Also, where they're shipping from the US, you're paying more for shipping, typically. Now, I can't speak for their paper quality, I can't speak for their colour quality, because I've not used them personally, I just know that they exist, and they are very popular. Obviously, it's pointless getting a comic printed if you can't get it distributed. So, a couple of distribution panels. The same guy who prints my comic also does an online store called UK On Display. Now, this is the deal he gives you. He takes 20% of the cover cost of your comic. So if your comic costs £1, when he sells it on his store, he takes 20p of that £1. And he will take care of the shipping and everything for you. And what he essentially does is, you print, say, 100 copies, he'll keep hold of 5 of them, put them on the online store, he then just puts direct credit into your account when they sell. It is absolutely no hassle, and he will ship worldwide for you too. And he takes care of that. Like, the store costs are his problem. If he doesn't make his money back, that's on him, and he doesn't bug you saying, oh, your comic cost me X amount to ship to this guy in Arizona. Never been a problem. So that's for physical copies. You've got Indie Planet, which they're linked to Kablam, they're mainly for the US, but again, that's physical copies. That's what's called print on demand. So for every time someone places an order, they print up the comic, they put the cover costs into your account with them, minus the amount it costs them to print that single issue. So if someone buys your comic for £3 and their print cost is £1.25, you get £1.75 into your account, and the guy who ordered it gets his comic sent out. Which depends on how many you've got with them in the past and what your current print cost is with them, so whether that's reasonable or not. I've not used them. Again, because they're linked to Kablam, I know of them, and I know they give you preferable rates if you got your comic printed with Kablam. But again, if you want to, try it out by all means. The bottom two are digital submissions. Now, what's great about digital is that there's no upfront cost. You're not printing anything physical. The guy at the other end isn't getting anything physical. There's no postage, and you can have unlimited numbers of copies. You don't have to say I'm limited to a print run of 150. Once those sell, I either have the money to print more or I don't. With this, it's just like, yes, let me send you another set of ones and zeros. Then you're always going to have more ones and zeros. As long as there's, as long as there's demand, you can have the supply going. Indie Planet Digital is essentially then a digital storefront. I don't know why they've separated it. If they can offer a print one, surely they can offer it as a digital one. Yeah. Comixology, they recently started an indie storefront wherein, again, they just sell it through their app. Apple take a share if it's being sold to an iDevice, which is kind of dickish, and they take a cut, so you're going to get less money through Comixology. I'd be careful as well what you actually agree to with digital distribution. You want to make sure that you're still holding all the cards. With Comixology, I can say for definite, I still hold all the cards. when it's distributed on there. They don't have any of the rights, any of the licenses. I can still take it to publishers. I can still withdraw it at any time, so on and so forth. They don't actually have any claim to my comic. But on the flip side of that, I get no protection from them if their system gets broken and people get copies of the comic illegally. So if someone sort of finds a way to pirate Comixology and start spreading my comic around, I have no recourse. So it's, be careful with what you sign. Personally, there is one distribution method that I prefer above all others. That is the next one. Go to goddamn conventions, people. Artist alleys. This was from MCM Expo. Now, MCM Expo gets a lot of hate and a lot of flack because it's very, very commercial, and it's essentially a giant dealer's room, but that makes it perfect to sell at. When you go to, the reason I don't sell Ayacon is because people come to Ayacon going, I'm going to have drinks, I'm going to meet up with X, Y, and Z, I'm going to view some panels, I'm going to go to the parties. When someone goes to MCM Expo, first thing they do is they go to the cash machine. Where's my bloody wallet? Hang on, we could have a crisis. There it is, that's all right. They go to the cash machine, they go, I'm going to withdraw everything in my bloody account, I'm going to come out with a shit ton of merchandise I didn't want, and I'm going to regret it in a week's time. That is the MCM Expo mindset. Great! Come, buy the merchandise you'll regret in a week. Take it all. Here, because it's not the mindset, it's not worth. I mean, MCM charged 40 quid for the table, for the full weekend, the full 3 days of trading. Naturally, you got your hotel costs, etc. Well, I would say make friends with someone who lives in London, so that you can then go, hi, I'm coming down to a convention. I haven't seen you in a while, we should hang out. Crash on their couch. Because basically the hotels around Expo are about £300–400. If you stop in a hotel, you're not going to make your money back. Just stop at a friend's place in London, if you have one. If you don't, make one. Get the tube in and out. The beautiful thing about displaying comics is that you don't have a lot of setup time. They give you like half an hour to an hour to actually get your stall set up. You literally turn up, that is in a little slip of metal about that big, and it literally just pulls up like that. That's that setup, done, 2 steps. And this stuff here, you literally just pull it out of a suitcase and put it on. You're done, you know, not even 5 minutes to get set up. So it's very no hassle. So it's not going to be like, if you were selling toys or something at a convention and you got all these big boxes and crap, yeah, okay, you might want to stay on site, it's going to be more convenient. It's comics. Okay, when you're lugging around 200 of the buggers, they're heavier than you originally thought, but still, it's not bulky, it's not difficult. The other great thing about conventions is that you meet other artists. All of these indie comics here were free. Well, I say free, what you do is you go, hello Nick Angel, author of 7th String, this is my comic, Arcadia. He goes, oh okay, that's very nice, I give him that, he gives me 7th String. We trade notes, and yeah, that's pretty much why you do it. It's a great way to socialise. Once you go to about 3 conventions, you'll notice who the regulars are. My 3rd convention was Bristol Comic Con earlier this year, and literally they came over and went, okay, you're clearly serious about this now, we're going for drinks and all-you-can-eat Chinese tonight, are you in? And you end up, you sat around a table with about 13 other artists and writers, you're chucking ideas around, you're having beers, you're eating, you're in good company. Hell, I would say go to conventions and sell a comic just to meet people, it's fantastic. You know, I've actually made some very, very good friends through it. Not only that, but if you're at a convention, you're not hiding behind the internet. The internet, one of the advantages of it is anonymity. One of the big drawbacks of it is anonymity. If you're selling your comic online, they don't see this. That isn't there at all. If you're selling your comic face to face, hi, I'm the author, this is my comic, let me talk to you about it, let me make a connection. Oh, you like me as a person, that's great. Even if my second comic is shit, you might still buy one. It's true. I have bought stuff from other artists on artist alleys, not because I like the work, but because I was like, well, he's a nice guy. I'm not going to name any names, but you know, and it happens. I'm sure you've done it before. You know, you buy something from someone and you're just like, well, he's a good kid. His art sucks, but he's a good kid. And it just gives you, talking to people directly is fantastic as well. You get a real energy off it, because you get people come over and like, what's your book about? It's about this. You're talking about something you're passionate about. They're getting, hopefully, excited by it, hopefully. And then money exchanges hands. And that's probably the most magical part, where you go, this is something that I produce off my own back, blood, sweat and tears, and someone has just put my money in my hand saying, yes, I think that is worth this. Money is society's way of giving out tokens to say, you have done your bit today. You deserve to go to Greg's and get a sausage roll because you put some hours in. And someone saying, here, have my tokens so I can have your comic book. There's no feeling like it. You will get a buzz and a high off it. It will probably make you an arrogant, egotistical bastard for all of 3 days after the convention. But it's fantastic. The convention high and atmosphere can't be beat. You won't make your money back. As I said earlier, I'm on a £700 loss at the moment. By the time I've paid train, hotel, actual fees for setting up the table, the print costs, everything else, running a huge bloody loss. But it doesn't matter. This is something you do out of passion and you do out of love. If you're doing it for the money, you're in the wrong room. You really are. We should probably move on from this slide, simply because some other stuff that we do need to cover. First of all, other resources. So I've rambled for a bit so far, but there are a lot of things that I won't cover simply because there are books that thick on the bloody subject, and even then they don't cover everything, so you end up with about 5 books that thick on the bloody subject, and you still don't know everything, and there will always be new things to learn. This was a Christmas present. This, after reading just some of it, not even all of it, I put the book on the shelf, and I did this. This is written by Freddie Williams II. He did a very long run on Robin, when it was just Robin, before it was Red Robin. When the DC reboot came along, he did the entire run of Captain Atom. He's currently working with Gail Simone on a book called The Movement. So he's a published artist, he knows what he's got damn well doing. So his book it's fantastic. I mean, this background that he's put on there, he admits in the book, is entirely Google SketchUp. When I mentioned earlier, if you need a cityscape, but you don't have 20 hours of your life to draw every individual building, bang, that's what he's done. He's just gone into SketchUp, knocked it up, print screened it, and put it there. Is it cheating? Yeah, maybe. This is a lesson notebook, drawing comic book action. If you're doing stuff with superheroes, this is probably going to be a good one for you. The reason being is that the guy shows his working. This isn't the crappy, you know, you get the, what's his name? Chris Hart. He's got about 50 really crappy books on drawing comics. They suck. And they all start with, draw a stick figure, add some muscles to the stick figure. Are you getting there? No, this guy doesn't work in 2D. He visualizes everything in 3D. He draws everything with cones and spears, not bloody lines and dots. But his underwork makes sense. And what you get to see a lot is that when he's drawing, before he takes it through to this stage, he's got a pencil drawing with like muscle strands, how the shoulder is connected to the arm, all sorts. And it's brilliant for actually standing down and looking at, right, so that's why this is contorting like that and twisting around that way. It's also good for foreshortening reference as well. He's got a lot of poses that are running, jumping, flying, a lot of action in there. And it's just good, again, don't copy over it. It's reference. Now, the other 2 books I wanted to bring to your attention, I don't think there's anyone in the world who has ever done a panel on drawing comics and not brought up this bastard. It just doesn't happen. Scott McCloud, I don't know where he came from or why people consider him an expert on the subject. All I know is I read his book and yeah, he does know his stuff. I gotta admit. He's got a couple of books where he basically breaks comics down and he tells you things that you already knew about comics, but you didn't know you already knew about comics. It's one of those books where you read through and you're like, oh shit, yeah. I think if for each page of that, you probably get about 2 oh shit yeahs per page. And by the time you've read it, you're consciously drawing comics in a different mind frame to how you were before. I swear I'm not on commission. The other one, and this is for any artist, comic artists, fine artists, drawing in the street artists, can I do your face for £5 artists? This. Have a look at this, this is beautiful. there are about 250 odd books called Anatomy for the Artist. So when you put this into Amazon, it's immediately going to give you a flood of results and an absolute headache. Thankfully, it's a garish yellow cover. Hell, it probably glows in the dark, I should imagine. But you know what you're looking for. The name is Gino Barsky. So, or Barsky, or however you pronounce it. I've never met the bloke, so I'm not going to feel bad if I mispronounce it. It is very much sort of charcoal drawings and pencil drawings, and it's all about muscle structure and anatomy, how things connect together, why they connect together that way. Hell, I would recommend this to a doctor as well. Just sort of like, I don't want to put it too simply, but the rib bone's connected to the... There, it's all there. And if you want to say, right, I want to see how a leg looks from behind, it's in the book. It's going to be there. Everything is in there. In fact, it's like, there's a page dedicated to how to draw a knob. Every bit of anatomy. You want boobs? This is how you draw boobs. Saggy, perky, round, flat, petite, bloody Elvira. But yes, those books are fantastic. I would check all of those out. There are other books, but a lot of people tend to pick and choose. These are the 4 books I found. Everyone I've taken them to has gone, these are brilliant. Other books I've taken people to, some have been like, yes, I love it. Others have been like, eh, it's so-so. So I'm not going to bring them up here. Now, what I should have left enough time for are some final tips, the opportunity for any remaining questions, but also I have a shed ton of indie comics here from people who were strangers to me before I started drawing, and are now friends who gave me comics for free because they saw I was persistent and actually serious about it, which is brilliant. So you can actually get a look at what you're up against if you do decide to come on in. Skill levels are all over the place. So you get people who have never even drawn before, but will do a comic, and they'll be accepted into the community. We don't make two ways about it. If someone's willing to put in the time and the effort to produce something, okay, we're going to tell them what needs to be worked on, but we're going to tell them nicely. We're not assholes, which is great. Because you go into some communities, the indie game making community, which I dip in and out of on occasion, they are elitist bastards. They really are. They are up there on us so bad.
Programmers can be assholes. Programmers can be assholes.
Oh yeah. When I was doing my games art and design course, the guys doing the programming course hated us doing the games art and design course, and us artists hated the programmers. It was great. We got into arguments, we were like, well, we've got this model of a dragon, and we've got this model of the wall, and this human, and what we want to do is the dragon burst through the wall, eat the human's head, and then come back out of the wall. And the programmer just went, piss off. Like, not doing it. So, first things first, start with something small. Comics tend to be, I mean, you two mentioned naturally a 2-page comic and a 1-page comic. Great. Or a webcomic would also do it, because you're usually doing sort of 4 panels once a week, just to get into the rhythm of it. Usually you're looking at a multiple of 8 for page counts. It's not a rule, it's just something we keep seeming to do. For example, you either get 8, 16, 24, or 32 pages in a comic. And it's not like we ever sat down around the table and went, this is how many pages we're going to have. It's going to be a multiple of 8. If anyone breaks that, we kill them. I think it was more a case of people started doing it, and people assumed it to be a rule. I think people very much like myself just picked up on it and went, well, I guess if that's what they're doing, that's what we do.
It's to do with the printing process. The sheets of paper, you usually have 4 panels on one side and then 4 panels on the other side.
Okay, so where they're doing both sides of the sheet,
yeah.
You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 pages. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So yeah, I love doing these things. You get to learn things as well as it's great. But yeah, if you think about it, when you're laying out a sheet, you're going to have page 1, page 2, and whichever other pages are on the bottom. So that would be why it's multiples of 8. I suppose you could do it as multiples of 4 for that reason too. Yeah. So, write a goddamn script. We covered this earlier. But the last thing you want to do, every time I hear someone saying, oh, I'm working on a comic at the moment. Oh yeah, what goes on? And they're like, oh, this, that, the other. I'm like, all right, that sounds interesting. How does it end? I don't know yet. Like, what? I'm making it up as I go along. Oh god, the consistency is going to be everywhere. There are going to be plot holes. It's not going to flow. The pacing is going to be out. It's like if you're writing a book. You don't write a novel going, I don't know what the 3 main arcs of this are going to be. I don't know where the climax is, I don't know how to build up to it, I don't know how we're going to come down from it afterwards. Basically, most forms of narrative work on a peak system. So you start at the bottom, build up tension, peak, bring it down a tiny bit, build up tension, peak, bring it down a bit, build up tension, peak. If that's your finale, then bring it right way back down. If you're not writing the script beforehand, or at least doing some form of pre-planning so that you know where everything is happening and what the main action beats of your comic are, and an action beat doesn't necessarily have to be action. If you're doing a romance comic, an action beat could be he gets rejected. That's still an action beat. If you don't know where those are, then you don't know what the pacing is. You get comics which are very claustrophobic because everything's happening all at once. You get other comics where you just sat there like, someone, please, stab him, or jump out a window, or do something. Do not just sit there talking. And hopefully none of you are thinking that right now. But you know, that's what you need in a comic. You need to have that pre-planning, you need to have that pacing down. Writing a script is going to help you do that. Do not just sort of go with whatever feels right. Now, realistic goals and deadlines. Okay, you've not got an official release schedule. Okay, you've not got a publisher barking down at you saying, do this, do that. But I find if you do not set a deadline, I can do that page tomorrow. I can do that page next week. I can do that page next month. Oh look, I never did the damn page. If you set a deadline, like at the moment my second comic has a deadline of the 31st of August, and I'm sweating out of places I did not know I could sweat from. Simply because I'm coming up against it, and it's gone from, you get to a point where you give yourself 3 months, say, to do the comic. In month 1 you do maybe 4, 6 pages. Month 2 you do about 8 pages. Month 3 you're literally doing 8 hours day job, 8 hours on the comic, 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours day job, 8 hours comic, 8 hours of sleep. Because it gives you that adrenaline, it gives you that push, and it gives you that urge. You either work better or worse under pressure. For me, I work better under pressure, deadlines help. Yes?
When you're working under pressure, do you ever suffer from like tendinitis or hand cramps or any...
Oh yeah, I've probably got the rest of a 40-year-old. I spend all day at my day job typing, because it's a boring office job, and then all day at home either drawing or gaming. My grandfather has arthritis in his wrists, my grandmother has arthritis in her wrists, my mother has it now, she found out last weekend, which, yeah, that's a phone call you always want. So yeah, I'm screwed. 3 ways from Sunday. There are some things you can do to try and help. You can get certain wrist guards. There you go, you're ahead of me there. There are things you can do to avoid it, but you're probably going to end up doing some damage at some point or another. I probably already have. I click weirdly when I do that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's happening already. Be sensible, but I know, for example, Japanese manga artists, because this is predominantly an anime manga con, 19 pages a week they're assigned with the Shonen Jump. 19 goddamn pages a week. Typically, 1 page should take an average artist, again there are extremes each way for this, but on average tends to be about 8 hours for a page. 19 pages in a week, times that by 8, yeah.
The thing is though, they have a lot of helpers.
They have assistants to do backgrounds, things like that, this is true, and that's going to cut down the time. But Japanese are fucking workaholics. They'll get up at 6 AM, they'll still be working at 10 PM, and they won't call that a late day. I don't have that work ethic. They do. Thankfully my day job is one where I can sit and draw as well, because I can more or less, if you want to do an indie comic, and this is going to sound really bad for the future of this economy, especially because we're already in the shitter, find a job you can do on autopilot, because you can do the job on autopilot, especially if you're behind a screen. I know some of my friends work in call centres and that helps them. I'm in sort of a back office where I've got admin work to do. I've got an 8-hour day and my admin work probably takes me around 3 hours. So the other 5 hours I draw character designs and stuff and try to look busy so that my boss doesn't ask me what I'm up to. If you can find quite an autonomous job like that, brilliant, it's going to give you the practice time. Your wrist is dead, but forget it, put it in a coffin, send it on, up the ship, it's fine. But deadlines do help. And what it also means is that where I'm friends with other indie artists, I've been getting texts all week now going like, dude, we're launching our comic at Melksham Comic Con alongside yours. We're your rivals, we're going to be competing with you, we want to see who can do the more sales, who gets the bigger buzz. is your comic done? Because ours is, we just finished the last page, and you sat there like, it is not done. However, goodbye, and the one thing you don't want to do is rush to the point that you sacrifice quality. If you get to that point, stop, walk away, come back in 5 minutes' time, maybe go play some Borderlands or something. You'll know when you hit that point anyway, but you'll go one or two ways. You'll either get to the point where you're sacrificing quality, or you'll get to the point where you're like, I didn't know I had this energy. And you're just like, I can draw a face like that. You know, and if you've been doing it for 4 hours straight and you're on like the second page that you've been drawing that night, then you do get to a point where you're just like, done next, without sacrificing it, which is good. You get on a roll. Music tends to help. If you've got Winamp, set up quite an energetic playlist and call it something that signifies that. Sort of a Gurren Lagann style enthusiasm and passion. Like your Winamp playlist should be something like the motherfucking list. And it should be fucking Dragon Force Coheed Gambria, it should just, Story of the Year, it should just thunder the pants off you. And you just go on the adrenaline. You'll crash out, it's okay, set your desk up in your bedroom, then all you have to do is flop out of your chair onto the bed. It's great. You won't have any sex for about a month, because by the time the missus comes in, no matter what mood she's in, you're just like, no. No. Get off. This we touched on earlier. Now, make friends with the other artists on the Artist Alley, because A, it gives you friends. Your friends are nice. They help. It's good to have people to talk to, especially like-minded people. It's great to be able to throw ideas around. They can be a great source of energy, a great source of influence. And also, when you're on an Artist Alley, typically, you'll turn up at 8, people will be kicked out of the con at 6, and then you pack up about 6:30. During that time, if you're doing it solo, at the moment, me and my missus have just had a baby, so she, coming up for the first birthday, I say just, it's been nearly a year, Christ. But she's still too little to really take into cons properly. It wouldn't be fair to expect the baby to sit there with me and the missus for those 9 hours. So a lot of the time I leave the missus at home, or I leave the missus in the hotel and I go on my own. And you sat there for 9 hours, it's your stock, you're responsible for it. You go for a piss, or you go to get something to eat, and someone pilfers half your stock while you're gone, I know it's unlikely to happen, because what's someone going to do with 50 copies of this if they nick it off your table? Except for jump behind your table and pretend that they're you, which would be really creepy. I actually had a friend sort of dive behind my table just because he was walking past and I was really tired. And I actually got a little sticky note and put on his jacket a thing that said, "Hi, I'm not Sam, but I can help you." Basically, you've got to sit there for 9 hours. It's an endurance test because you're not going to the toilet, you're not going for food or anything like that if you are on your own. And having friends there that are like-minded, that have just done the same slog, who want to go get some food and go get a beer, just checking how we're doing for time, we're okay so far. Who want to go, you know, they've just been through the exact same thing. So you sit down in the Wetherspoons or what have you, you have some beers, you have a chat, you have a meal. It's just really nice. And they know. It's like you can talk to your other half about it, but they don't get it. You talk to other artists about it, they're just like, we skipped over one. Have the printer in mind before you start drawing anything. Now this is what we mentioned earlier, setting up the templates, right, bleed, crop margins, etc. You don't want them charging you extra, and also you want a good relationship with your printer. You want them to be like, oh, that guy, I love that guy, I'm gonna put it in the top of the pile, turn around in 4 days. If you're a bastard to your printer, you're going to the bottom of the pile. You're seeing your comics in 3-4 weeks, instead of 3-4 days. Treat him like a human being. Usually they're passionate, especially UK comics. Stuart Gould, he's very passionate. He's the kind of guy who will turn up at a convention, walk around the Artist Alley, and the guys who got comics printed with them, he'll walk up, he'll ask how you're doing, he'll shake your hand, he'll have a chat with you, he'll ask how the missus and the kid are. What more can you want, eh? And it just makes everything easier. Especially if they've not got less work to do, because sometimes they'll even knock the price down a bit. If you sent it to them and it's all pre-formatted and all they have to do is hit a button, they'll just be like, I'll knock 20 quid off. You know, and 20 quid when you're looking at very small margins, usually you'll print a comic at about £1.5 per copy. You'll sell it for about £3 per copy, but paying the hotels, the trains, etc., you're still making a loss. The reason you can't really go higher than that is because Marvel DC comics tend to be between £270 and £330. because that's what people are about, used to paying for, and because you're unknown when you're in indie, they expect to pay less. You see some people turn up with their indie comics, they try to charge a £5 for it. Halfway through the day you see them scribbling the £5 out. You can't charge too much for them, it's really sad. Also, with regards to setting realistic goals, I've only known one person to say I'm going to do a 120-page book for my first book who actually did it. Most people say I'm going to do a 120-page book, they get to page 24 where they've got enough to release a single issue and they give up, because it's too much work, and the end goal is too far from sight. Start realistic. If you're going to do a graphic novel, my suggestion at the stage we're at would be more like this guy. Did a comic called Hero 9 to 5. He released 5 single issues. After the 5 single issues were out, he collected them as a graphic novel. It is another DC way of doing things, but again, when you work into our level, it suits you. It also means that once you've done the first 24 pages, although you might be planning to do 120, you can start getting some money back in from the sale of those 24 pages as a single issue. It makes business sense, it makes motivational sense, it's just smart. The worst thing that can happen is you do 24 pages, realise that you're not going to make it to 120, so you bring the ending forward in issue 2 instead of issue 6. As long as you don't make it crap, then that's okay, it's acceptable. Now, this I see a lot. You're not professional. You are not. Even though you are taking money, you need to see this as a hobby because of the loss of money involved. Now, usually there would be the recourse, and the missus had this for a while, and so did my father, of you must be doing it wrong if you're hemorrhaging money on it. However, this was sort of set aside on that third convention when I first went out for drinks with the other artists, and they all confirmed to me that they are on similar figures. Pretty much everyone you see in RSL is running on a loss. If they break even, they cheer. So if you see those guys, please give them some of your cash and buy something from them. They're doing it for all the right reasons. And as I say, at the end of the day, they've put their money, their passion into it, and they're still losing stuff, but they're there again the next time. They keep coming back. And they come back because they care and because they're passionate. They love what they're doing, and if you can help them to at least break even, then it just means they've covered their costs at least. And they're also bringing something to you. They're bringing you entertainment that would otherwise not be there. And that's also why a lot of indie artists will do sort of talks like this and things, because if this gives a spark of sort of motivation to even one person in the room, and they go away and they draw a comic and they bring it to conventions, that's a new form of entertainment on the table. That's something that no one's ever read before and would not have read otherwise. And that is probably the best reward you can give to an indie artist, is to join in. Because it's a hell of... I've made it sound like a lot of work because it is. I've made it sound like hell at times because it is. But it's the most fun I've ever had. And the best people I've known I've met through doing it. I can't recommend it highly enough. Just be prepared for your overdraft and your credit card to take a hit. Now, because you're not professional yet, what you don't want to do is pick up your book, get, say, the newest issue of Batman and Robin, and be like, oh, my work is nowhere near there, it's nowhere near that quality. It's not going to be. These are guys in their late 30s, early 40s, have been doing it for 10, maybe 20 years. You've just put out your first comic. No, you're not going to be near them. Unless you're an absolute genius, and I doubt there's a genius in this room, just through law of averages and law of probability, nothing personal against anyone here, you're not at that level. So it's stupid to compare yourself to that level just yet. Once you've done a few, and you're getting into the rhythm of it, and you can start knocking them out a little more quickly and a little more refined, then yeah, maybe, but compare yourself to your peers. That is 7 string. That is incredibly popular. It's not the best start in the world. I like it, it's a very unique style, and I love the guy, Nick Angel. It's not, and there are flaws in the art, there are flaws in my art, I can probably go through and count them, but it's not about that right now. It's, as I said earlier, your skill level, whatever your skill level is, you will be welcomed. Even if you're not getting them printed properly, even if you are going down to the corner shop, printing a bunch of A4 and stapling it yourself, you are still welcome. And I think that is, the amount of people who have done it that way on this table, that should tell you enough right there. So yeah, if it's not pro quality, don't worry. You're still there for it. And you'll get better. The only way you can get better at doing something is to keep doing it. If you stop doing it, that's when you're going to have a problem. Now, I think we've covered this quite heavily. And it's okay to ask for help. So what I typically do is, within the circle of artists that I'm friends with as a result of having done a comic, is I will send them sample pages, I will send them samples of scripts, I will say, does this work? I will give copies of it pre-release to non-comic-y people, my friends and family. They don't give two shits about comics. I hand them one, I have them read through it, they don't know the first thing about comics, and I say, right, does that make sense to you, does that entertain you? If they're happy with it, then people who actually read comics are probably going to be happy with it. The people who actually draw comics are the other extreme I have available, and they will point out all the little technical fiddly-niggly bits, so you're getting both sides of the coin. Don't work in a vacuum, whatever you do. And the other thing is, you commonly hear, yeah, I'd love to share my work with other people, and I'd love to get their feedback pre-release, but what if they run off with my files? Two ways to do that. Number one, you can either give them screen resolution, so 72 dpi instead of 300 dpi, so that if they do try to print it, it'll look like crap, but they'll still be able to read it on their PC screen and give you feedback on it. The other is, my God, people trust people now and then. I know we're 2013, I know fraudsters are everywhere, I know we're always scared of terrorists and all the rest of it, but some people are genuinely nice. It's scary that this still exists. There are people out in the world that you can actually say, look, here is my baby, please don't kill it. And they'll do it. And I think you will be able to filter out the people who are there for the wrong reasons and the people who are there for the right reasons. You have your own human discretion, you have brains, use them. It is, these people are not they're your rivals in the friend sense. They're not your enemies. You're not trying to run them out of business, they're not trying to run you out of business. You both want to create great comics, and they will help you do that. So please do ask them. Right, so we've not run out of time, which is great. I checked out on my phone a minute ago. At the moment, does anybody have any questions? Yes, at the back.
I have a question about colouring in Photoshop if you use Photoshop.
Yep.
Once you've done like the line art on one layer,
yes.
How would you quickly just add like the base colours? Is there a way to do that, or would you have to?
I create one layer underneath the line work layer.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to do this. Some people will probably flame me. I can see you nodding already. But I then take the magic wand tool and I set the tick box of sample all layers on, and I click all the areas that are going to have one set colour. And then, because Magic Wand is crap and doesn't pick everything up, I go to Select, Modify. You need me to slow down if you're writing it?
Oh no, it's
You're good, right, okay. Select, Modify, Expand, and then I just expand it by 2, maybe 3 pixels, so that the area I've selected goes into the line art.
Yeah.
And then I just fill that area. What you then have to do is deselect it, zoom in, and there'll be like little corners and stuff where the one select hasn't caught, and you just go in and you manually just sort of fill that in. And that then is very quick. It's relatively accurate, so with things like hair you will need to go in, especially if it's spiky hair, and just manually do the edging, but it'll get the base bit done, and then you just need to show your own discretion of going in and tidying it up, essentially.
Thank you.
That's all right. The other thing I'd say as well is some people do a hybrid workflow, where they do the inks on physical paper, scan that in, then do the colours on computer. When you're working digitally, because you're just putting the black line art down, there's no white there to get rid of. You've just got your black lines. When you're doing it from a scan, you've got the black and the white all part of one image. The easiest way to get rid of that is just set the layer type to multiply. Now get rid of all the white straight away, it's gone. And you can just put the colour directly underneath and carry on as normal. The other thing as well, with regards to there's questions, but there is also a crap ton of indie comics here. If you guys want to get an idea for what's out there and what people are doing, by all means feel free to come up, have a look, rifle through. Because if you know what other people are doing, it's going to give you that idea for the different skill levels that are about, the different types of stories that are about. It might spark something. and it doesn't hurt to look at your friendly competition. Don't all get up at once. As I say, there's an absolute ton from that. And feel free to have a look through. If you want any further information, I need to be one slide before. Sorry. If you need any further information, I will look to put a copy of these slides up on my website, just sjwebster.net. There has been filming going on by the wonderful Tom at the back there, so there will be a video of the talk. At the moment, he's given me his permission, but his missus hasn't given me permission to put the video on my site. His missus is a lovely woman, so I'm sure it won't be a problem, but as long as she says okay, there will be video to go along with the slides so that you've got the narration and the slides. So if you want to refer back to anything, you can. I think, unless anyone wants to have a look at the comics, I think that about wraps us up.